have a wonderful conference. Thanks again for being here, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Lee Schwartz, former geographer of the United States, and now our newest OpenStreetMap US Advisory Council member, to the stage to say a few words.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the second day of the conference, and I want to congratulate Maggie and her team for putting together a great program, as well as an always fun gathering. And also, I know Maggie was up late last night baking for the birthday party, so congratulations on the 15th anniversary of OpenStreetMap USA. I have spoken and attended OpenStreetMap conferences actually all over the world, in Latin America, in Asia, and I can say that the USA meetings are by far the best of all of them. There's a lot of activities, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of youth, there's a lot of diversity, and really kudos out to the team that worked so hard to put this together all year. And I'm also proud to be a member of the recently constituted OSM USA Advisory Council, and I fully expect the next 15 years to continue to see growth in the OSM community, and also to continue to provide value for providing both bottom-up and top-down knowledge to build communities, democratize data, and inform decision-making. So I am a geographer, at the core. I got my undergraduate degree in geography, my graduate degree in geography, my PhD in geography, and I taught geography, and I worked at the U.S. Office of the Geographer in the Department of State. And so I'm just curious, how many people here have their degrees or any degrees in geography? All right, that's a good showing. So many, their geography programs are under attack in a lot of universities, and there are GIS sciences degrees as well. How many people have a degree or certificate in GIS or GIS sciences as well? That's great. And how many people here don't have a degree in anything related to geography or GIS sciences? Wow, that is really fabulous, because that's what this community needs in order to grow. So that's good news. Any teachers? Teachers here? Great. So, and anybody who's in school, university still? Great. All right. Well, as usual, it's a great mix of folks. And I always like to know how many people, maybe this is a silly question to ask for this group, how many people are aware of the work John Snow did in London in 1854? Right, okay, he's the father of, they call him the father of epidemiology, but he's also the father of citizen science, and really, of citizen mapping, because of the way they determined that the cholera outbreak in London was point-based at a water source as opposed to airborne like it was thought at the time. And the reason I mention that now is because this is not new. Participatory, volunteer mapping has been around now for almost 2 centuries. But what is new really is the effort to make this information free and available and open for everybody to use to better empower their own communities. So that's really what the community is all about. My former job as the geographer of the Department of State focused purely internationally. Matter of fact, the only place we couldn't do work was in the United States. And so, this is OSM USA. My work was international, but there are a lot of corollaries to the activities. In particular, we did a lot of maps. So everybody, I think, at their core loves mapping. And I've always said that, the real challenge of mapping when it comes to data is all maps have either incomplete data, bad data, or no data. Nobody's ever satisfied with the information on the map. You can always drill down deeper. If it's a census tract, you want a housing block, or you want a house, or even now you're mapping inside individual homes and rooms and things. So, and I also was part of the academic debate that took place years ago between volunteer geographic information and participatory mapping. This is kind of a fun debate that many of you aren't aware of, where the volunteer geographic information were the purists, and they were accusing the participatory mappers of working for the man, because that was a project that was designed to get information, and all information was skewed if it wasn't freely provided by people without being directed because of his particular project that would introduce bias into the information. And my position has always been very agnostic. All right, it doesn't really matter. To me, it doesn't matter if it's directed or purely voluntary. What's really important is that I wanted accurate and verifiable information. And that's what this is all about. And so what do I mean by bottom-up and top-down observations and data and knowledge? Essentially, this is what we call imagery-driven participatory mapping. It combines Earth information and in situ observations and measurements to collect ground truth, and the primary mission is to discover new truths by compiling maps that are as accurate and current as possible. So that doesn't sound too challenging, but I think we all know that there are a lot of challenges, and in particular right now, we're in the midst of a growing struggle regarding ground truth and disinformation. Because while local knowledge and ground truthing remains critical in the world of artificial intelligence and machine learning and virtual reality and 3D mapping, at the same time, it's become increasingly difficult because of the amount of mis and disinformation that's out there and the fact that machine learning models risk being trained on bad data. And when I was in my last year at the State Department, we saw this in spades working in places like the Gaza Strip, where there wasn't much information. A lot of the information, couldn't be verified, and it really is risky because everybody doesn't want to have, holes in their maps. Nobody wants to produce a map with holes. And so the inclination is to fill the map even if you have bad data. And that gets generated without being able to be verified, and it gets populated and popular, and all of a sudden bad data becomes the truth when it's not really the truth. So that's what, again, this community needs to focus on. And right now we're also in the transition from what we call the age of mapping to the age of monitoring, right? Where there's choices between persistent coverage with mini satellites and all over the globe and the scale of analysis. And the challenges are related to issues such as timeliness, the rate of revisitation, both from imagery and ground truthing, and also issues of equity, right? So in timeliness, whether it's a rapid onset or natural disaster or a hurricane where you have some warning, or even, a local political campaign. The timing of when information is collected is important. And also, we haven't really figured out when we need to revisit information that lives on a map that was collected because of the volunteer spirit of a crisis where everybody gets together and maps something, and then they forget about it, they move on to something else. That information lives in the map, and I think there's a lot of value in machine learning to sort of tip and cue when things change enough that the community that has mapped it originally, or even another community, can go make changes. So that's another challenge we have. And then there's issues of equity, because there are always going to be biases in both human and machine intelligence, right? And so I'll say again that machine learning models risk being trained on bad data, and that's where this community can really make a difference. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention the current political atmosphere right now, where really we are at risk because of actions by the executive branch of capriciously attacking good data and strong science and the communities that work on this. And I think that's going to be a challenge for this community and others to work with. Volunteerism is wonderful, but funding is critical, including funding from the federal government to OSM communities, including those housed in universities and NGOs, those on scholarships, as well as skilled mappers who are needed to respond to crises. So that's why it matters that in this community, at the same time as remote sensing capabilities are rapidly expanding, our toolbox for ground truthing is in many ways under attack, funding issues notwithstanding. In the international arena that I worked in for many years, disinformation and misinformation is really clouding the information landscape. Authoritarian regimes, as we all know, are cracking down on civil society and threatening journalists and migrants alike. Humanitarian actors are increasingly under restrictions for working on the ground or being caught in the crossfire in places like Sudan and the Gaza Strip. And the bottom line is, I think the importance of local knowledge paired with community mapping is growing worldwide as well as in our communities. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now and ask today's plenary panel to come up to the stage, if you will. And I'm going to soon turn the floor over to Chad Blevins. But I want to give a shout out to my good friend, Gerald Orstaglio, who helped put this group together. We have like-minded panelists who will be addressing the conference theme of mobility, and in particular the challenges of working in cities, not only to improve mobility, but also to enhance and preserve the ecosystem and the quality of life for its residents. So Gerald, my friend, was one of the founding members of the Esplanade Association, which you will hear more about soon in this session. Chad, who's going to be chairing the session, is a shaker and mover in the world of open mapping, and I've known him now for many years, starting with his work both on remote sensing and open mapping for USAID's Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, and then its GeoCenter, and his leadership in the open mapping community, including being the co-founder of Youth Mappers, which you're probably all familiar with. Many of you might have seen his talk yesterday, where he updated the work of the OSM U.S. Pedestrian Working Group that he chairs, and he's very active in all facets of open mapping. He's coordinated projects all over the world, and what I love about Chad is he is both a thought leader and an active practitioner in the world of open data. So over to you, Chad.
Thank you, Lee.
Sure.
That was quite the introduction. This is shut. Okay. All right. Time to walk and roll here. How many people walked here today? Pretty much everyone. How many people biked here today? Handful. I guess you have to live here to have a bike to bike here or share. Cool. Well, I'd just like to, I think Lee did a good job introducing myself, and I want to give the panelists a moment to introduce themselves before and the organizations they represent before we get into some of the questions here. So we'll start with Allie.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Lee. It's really exciting to be here today. My name is Allie Bedridjian. I'm the Director of Projects and Planning at the Esplanade Association. And when I first was invited to be on this panel, I was like, wow, I was a sociology major. I don't really know anything about mapping and how important maps are. But when I really started to think about it and was putting my bio together, I was realizing how important maps really have been along the way. First, in sociology, that where you live has such a huge impact on how you interact socially, on health outcomes, on education outcomes. I could go on, but my first role out of school, I worked for Kaboom. It's a nonprofit that builds playgrounds around the country. It's really where I honed my skills as a project manager. I think I saw Kaboom on the workshop schedule this week. Hi. Oh, that's awesome. Nice to see you. And at Kaboom, I managed playground projects and helped communities to build playgrounds that suited the needs of the children and families in their communities. Kaboom has also done some really incredible mapping work, participatory mapping, to help people find playgrounds in their neighborhoods and communities that can suit their families' needs. After that, I worked at the National Public Radio headquarters for 4 years. While I was there, I was working with their sponsorship team, so a little bit different projects, but we used geolocation data to help serve ads to people that made sense for where they lived. We were working on sponsorships to help bring NPR to new digital platforms, smart speakers, smartphones, even smart fridges at one point. Which was interesting. And then when I moved to Boston, really wanted to get back outside, so I was looking for project management roles, and first looked at the Greenway. I hope everyone has had a chance to visit the Rose Kennedy Greenway. Absolutely incredible green space in Boston. But was lucky to find the Esplanade Association and started as their capital projects manager in 2019. Now as their director of projects and planning, I work on projects including playground renovations. We're currently building a new visitor center that will have the Esplanade's first year-round restrooms and a cafe and some wonderful community spaces for people to gather and really enjoy the 64-acre park along the river there. And some of the other projects in my portfolio that are really important to me include access and safety. So helping our pathways reach more visitors in a way that's safe and comfortable for everyone. That includes multimodal access for everyone. So I'm sure we'll get into that a lot today. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you. And Yolando?
Hi, everybody. My name is Yolando Spinola. I'm with Walk Massachusetts, Senior Program Manager, and I'm excited to be here. Maps are something that has always been in the background in a lot of ways in my life. I did get to minor in geography when I was in undergrad. I was interested in majoring, but sociology also was close to my heart. And I think it's because people in maps kind of go together, and I want to make an impact. I wanted to make an impact, and some of the people aspects of things were things that were close to my heart. So yeah, I got to, after graduating from undergrad, I got to work with some youth organization, basically trying to empower them to see how they can make a difference in their world. And after I did that for a few years, I decided I wanted to go back to school and study community engagement. How can we get folks to actually start to impact the places where they live in regards to the transportation system, the housing system? So I studied community engagement for my master's program, and then I got to work for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, so really empowering folks to try to take action in the planning efforts in their community, educating folks around like the power that they have to impact housing, transportation, and all those topics. After doing that for a few years, I decided I really wanted to hone in on the topic of walkability, and I joined Walk Massachusetts, and it's been great, and we really hone in on walkability in our communities to try to see like how can we make it safer for folks and make it more enjoyable and get a lot of the benefits that exist from walking in our communities. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and to tell you a little bit more about Walk Massachusetts and the work that we do.
Thanks. And Scott?
Yeah, hi, I'm Scott. I am a volunteer at Boston Cyclist Union. It's a organization, nonprofit, here in Boston that is working to build safer bike infrastructure, more inclusive, more accessible, to get more people riding their bikes. Biking and safe bike systems are really great for all the problems, basically. And so Boston Cyclist Union's been heavily involved in trying to make Boston and Greater Boston a much better biking city. If you've seen people biking around the area, it's partly due to Boston Cyclist Union's effort, specifically on Comm Ave, which is the street that we're on right now. If you go like 2 blocks up, you can start to see some separated bike lanes. And that was the first big project of Boston Cyclist Union that they were successful in pushing. Since then, a bunch of other projects throughout the city, and then working with other groups in Cambridge, et cetera. So now Boston is arguably one of the best cities in the country to bike around in. And so we're trying to continue that. A couple of years ago, went on a big fundraising bike ride from Boston to Montreal with the Boston Cyclist Union. And so in the process of that, you get like kind of involved in learning about making routes and what safe bike routes are for going on training rides, and then how you bike all the way up to Montreal. Coming out of that, I was pretty excited about biking and about the Boston Cyclist Union. And so I worked with some of the people on that ride, and we started what is now called BCU Labs. And this is an effort to try to take a data-based approach at advocacy and try to build tools to help bike advocates throughout the city and the neighboring cities and the region to be able to defend what we're trying to argue for a little better, and also do better at prioritizing what we want to advocate for. So it's still pretty early, but we have a couple of projects that you can see that we have just released a month ago, which is a pretty big, exciting process. But as a whole, that whole group is volunteer run, volunteer organized. Everyone that's working is volunteer. So I think that'll be pretty familiar to a lot of people in here. working on maps.
Thank you. So it sounds like maps are important, and you all use them for in all of your organizations. So this is an OpenStreetMap conference, and we really focus on the creation of map data. So I'd just like to ask, what source of map data do you use? Do you create it yourself? Do you use OpenStreetMap data? And how do you kind of implement that and put it into applications to make it useful for your work? And we'll start with Ali.
Okay, thank you, Chad. Well, at the Esplanade Association, we work in partnership with the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. They have some really wonderful map tools that we've been able to lean on when it comes to alerts in the park, if there's construction going on, if people want to learn how best to get to their local parks. So for the Charles River Esplanade and for many of DCR's other parks, they steward about 450,000 acres across the state. So leaning on some of their tools. And then at the Esplanade Association, we have some other map tools that we're using, mostly through Google tools. One of the more interesting ones that we've used over the years are Google Plus codes, which I discovered for our team when we needed to bring deliveries to the park or direct people to certain parts of the park where there are no addresses. It's 3 miles along the river, and there's maybe one building that has an actual address. So being able to use Google Plus codes, which are based on latitude and longitude, give that to a truck driver and say, can you please try to get as close as possible to this location? And sharing more about Google Plus codes with folks was really interesting. And let's see, our website has a map that one member of our team built using a Google custom map tool. So it has little labels that you can toggle on and off to discover public art on the Esplanade, find our restrooms, find our water fountains, find other accessibility information. I'd say it's not a perfect tool. As Lee said, a lot of maps have a lot of information missing, and this one definitely does. There's also, I think, a little bit of clutter. Some of the labels get to be a little bit too much. I really like the OpenStreetMap view. I think it's a lot cleaner and while still providing a lot more information, so we might have a little switch in our future coming up. Let's see, we also, we love looking at historic maps of the Esplanade. I'm sure lots of folks here have visited the Leventhal Map Center, looked through some of their historic maps of the city. It's really wonderful to see how Boston has integrated parks and green spaces going all the way back to the 1700s and 1800s and even earlier, whether it was a place for the public to let their cows graze on Boston Common, or starting to bring in green engineering. There's different parks that allow for riverways and creeks to become a part of the engineered landscape of Boston. And as downtown Boston was filled in, as those tidelands were filled in, the Esplanade was created in the late 1800s. So being able to look at historic maps and use that history to inspire us as we are building our new building on the Esplanade and working on trying to make our pathways safer within this very narrow space that we can't necessarily go out and build more park, but we can look back at the history of the park through these map spaces and understand a little bit more about its intent and then how we can move forward into the future.
Thank you. And Yolanda?
Great. Yeah, so Walk Massachusetts, we've been around for 30 years, and maps have been a big piece of our work and have been in the background. We started off as Walk Boston, and we eventually became Walk Massachusetts because we realized that walkability is a challenge throughout the whole state, and it actually falls off a cliff once you leave Greater Boston. And when we use maps, we like to use, fold in the community insights that we gather during our walk audit. Who here has walked around their community and has seen problems when walking around? Most likely everybody, right? So we believe that people are the experts where they live, and they see a lot of the challenges with sidewalks, with crosswalks. They see what amenities are in their communities, like shade or benches, and they also understand where the gaps are. So we conduct walk audits. So we go out into the community with folks and try to collect as much data. We provide a map to them, and people like to draw on the maps. Some people just write down as many notes as they can. on clipboards with us, but we'd love to see what people jot down on their physical copies of maps, and then we have people take pictures as they take part on the walk audit, and then they share the pictures with us, and then we basically put that all pictures now are geotagged or have geo information into it, and we fold that into a map so that we can understand where the problem exists or where the amenities are or what folks identified as different things along their walk audit. And then we generate a walk audit report that folds in all those insights, recommendations that community members shared with us. And these walk audit reports, they're a community engagement tool for folks to try to move their decision makers locally to improve walkability, to improve the transportation systems where they live. And it's all user data, and maps are a key piece of it. So yeah, that's how we use maps.
Great, thanks. I love drawing on maps. Scott?
So the two big projects that I referenced earlier are both maps. The first project we call the Landways. It's basically our dream of what a bike network and the arterial bike network would look like. And so we're trying to build that up. That's very much a vision. And then the other big project is our stress map, where we rate every street in Greater Boston on how comfortable it is to ride a bike. And that one is very specifically taking OpenStreetMap data and running calculations on the tags to estimate that comfort level. The Landways project is much more taking a look at the map and trying to, the vision is to create a subway style map. So trying to convert lines, the kind of crayon drawn lines, into something stylistically that people can see. This is the most useful way to get across the city. And so it's kind of looking at, one is a vision and one is looking at what is on the ground currently. And then also one is kind of what you would look at to see the fine tune, oh, if I move over a block here, it will be nicer to ride on. Whereas the other one is, how do I get generally from Cambridge to downtown Boston, or from downtown Boston to Jamaica Plain. But basically, going across the city, what is the best routes? What are the big trunk routes? And so we're very much looking at different tools for that. It's all very early in what we're doing, but OpenStreetMaps has been a great resource for that. And some of the other stuff, depending on who's working on it, sometimes it's more Google Maps versus OpenStreetMaps. And we have some other projects that, again, we're working on. And it's all based on trying to place specific details of the experience of biking in Boston to locations so that we can then further advocate on fixing specific locations. And so that's, you kind of need maps to be able to point out, like, this gap right here is what's causing it to be uncomfortable to bike, and that's preventing people from getting on their bike to begin with. And so that safety problem is a big problem, and the only way we can show those gaps is using maps.
Thanks. I used your stress map in my presentation yesterday because I thought it was such a good example of roads that are comfortable to ride on, and we're considering doing something similar with the pedestrian working group as well, so thanks for that example. Okay, I'd like to just ask each of you individual questions based on your first response there. Starting with Ali, you did mention multimodal transportation. I know that's becoming like more commonly seen throughout, and when you're managing a trail network that's very long and very narrow, that's getting more and more visitors each year, what are some of the rules and regulations and maybe data that you're creating to support decisions, policies around that?
Thank you, Chad. Yeah, so the Esplanade is a very long and narrow park, about 3 miles long. In some areas, it's only about 9 feet wide. And so in those areas, you might only have one pathway that everyone is traveling on. In other parts of the park, we have closer to 80 or 100 feet, and there might be multiple paths. A little bit of a choose your own adventure where you could be on a path that's closer to the Charles River, a little bit more scenic, or be on a path that's closer to Storrow Drive, which is the big roadway outside of the northern side of the building here. There are rules and regulations. There's also a lot of opinions in this space about multimodal transit and how everyone can move together safely. Especially on the Esplanade, we receive over 4 million visitors a year. We're the state's most visited park in their park system. And a lot of folks, see the Esplanade really as it's the fastest way to get across town in the morning or in the afternoon. You have commuters getting to Mass General Hospital. You have folks who work downtown, folks who work in Cambridge or who live in Cambridge and are coming down to the city. And then you also have folks who are going for their morning stroll, who are just having a nice time with a cup of tea, taking grandma for a walk, teaching their little kids how to ride a bike. And so we really advocate first and foremost for everyone to be able to use this shared resource, this Commonwealth resource, safely and kindly for everyone. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen, and this is really where rules and regulations come in. The Department of Conservation and Recreation has been working recently to have more consistent signage in the park. Signage is a big way that this messaging comes across to people as you're entering the park for the first time. Maybe you haven't had the chance to check DCR's park rules. I don't think a lot of people do that before they go. But arriving to the park, folks will see signs that say that motorized vehicles are not allowed in the park. And DCR's signs actually include a symbol of an e-bike, of a bicycle with a little electric plug, which I find controversial. I think if someone's riding safely in the park on an e-bike, someone's getting to work, they're being safe, they have a helmet on, they're being courteous, letting folks know when they're passing. I think e-bikes should be there, and the Esplanade Association advocates for that. To have an e-bike next to a symbol of an off-road vehicle and next to a pickup truck, I don't know if DCR is really intending for folks who are riding Class 1 pedal assist e-bikes to not be allowed in the park. So that's an ongoing conversation about how we can help that messaging be more clear for people who are visiting the park and using the pathways appropriately. DCR's park rules do state that Class 2 and Class 3 e-bikes are not allowed. These are e-bikes that are road ready. They're more appropriate in areas where vehicular use is permitted, which is very much not the Esplanade. So those delivery guys on mopeds, they're really the ones that DCR is trying to remove from the park. But being that the Esplanade is one of the fastest ways to get from point A to point B in town, especially during rush hour, we do still see folks out in the park using those types of motorized conveyances. This is where, I suppose, enforcement comes in. It's a sticky topic. It's one that the state police, I believe, are working on. But you don't want to introduce like a trooper driving down the pathway trying to chase somebody. It adds a difficult layer to the situation. So really trying to focus on messaging first, trying to help people understand before they get to the park what's safe and what's appropriate. So that's what the Esplanade Association has been working on with DCR. In 2022, we did a pilot project where we worked with a traffic engineering firm to devise some new paint symbols for the park. We launched those at 4 particularly tricky intersections on the Esplanade where we saw higher incidence of crashes, fewer incidences of people yielding and sharing to each other. And we found after the pilot paint project that people who were moving at the park's top speeds were reduced. The number of people in that top speed category as well as the actual top speed in the park both came down. We also saw higher percentages of people using yielding and sharing behavior and fewer what we called near misses, kind of watching some video and seeing how close people on foot and on wheels were coming to each other. And so we're working now with the state to help simplify the symbols that we put out at those 4 pilot locations and introduce them park-wide. So in the future, you might be able to see at around 40 different locations on the Esplanade at different tricky intersections, at footbridge entrances, at entrances to different amenities like our playgrounds, that it's reminding you to look both ways before you cross a path, or it's reminding you to slow down as you're approaching a tricky area. For us, it's really less about enforcement, less about telling people that they can't be in the park, and more about helping people separate themselves by speed, so that if you're going fast, just stay closer to Storrow Drive, so that folks who are there for that scenic route on the riverside can take that path and feel safe doing it. And to remind people to just be kind and share the path. There's lots of people out there, and we want everyone to enjoy it together. I think maps can really help us with that. Using OpenStreetMap or using some of our Google tools to be able to help people know before they get to the park, if you're on wheels, which route might be more comfortable for you. If you're trying to move quickly, which route might be more comfortable for you. If there are areas with stairs, trying to avoid those if you're on wheels. Using maps to show people when our seasonal features are open, like our restrooms and water fountains, which turn off in the wintertime. But also just giving that safety information as a layer on the map is something that I think we'll be looking forward to do in the future.
That's great. The all-important signage, they're very deliberate. So when you see them, read them and follow the rules if you can, especially on busy pathways. Thank you for that. And Yolanda, you mentioned the walk audit earlier, and I thought that was interesting. I know a lot of people in this room have probably done similar work out in the field, mapping, capturing data with their phones and other devices. OSM US even maintains the field papers for capturing data in the field and then adding it to OpenStreetMap later. I just wanted to ask if you could dive into that a little bit more and tell us exactly how you decide where you're going to conduct a walk audit, maybe who you invite to walk that area with you, if you capture pictures or photos or street level imagery, and what are those key details that you're looking for when you conduct those audits to help improve walkability?
Yeah, definitely. Walk audits, we get invited by a variety of different folks. It really depends on the place and what the challenges are. Many times it's community-based organizations who might be applying for a grant and they think a walk audit will give them really important insights for their larger project, or maybe they just are living in a place and working in a place, and some of the walkability challenges, pedestrian fatalities or speeding is a challenge and they want to address it, so they might invite us in. A lot of communities have a bike and ped advisory committee that is a part of basically the municipalities, and they might invite us to take part in a walk audit or encourages us to come in and help them conduct a walk audit. So those are some of the folks that typically might reach out to us, but it might also be a state grant that allows us to work in a certain place. And we put out a crash report every year, which is basically like where in the state we see the highest amount of pedestrian fatalities. Unfortunately, like pedestrian fatalities have been trending upwards past the pandemic. And there's certain places in our state where this trend is continuing and continues to be a problem. So whenever we apply for a state grant, we really try to hone in on those places to see how we can make an impact and provide them with additional resources and support. And regional planning agencies also are very involved in this topic. So folks like the Metropolitan Area Planning Council or the Old Colony Planning Council, there's a whole bunch of them throughout our state, and many people don't even think of them, but they're very involved in transportation planning, and they sometimes invite us in. So we try to make sure that once we are hosting a walk audit or taking part in a walk audit, that there are folks representing different parts of the community that have different lived experiences taking part in our walk audit. So it's not just for people who are regular walkers. We want people who are using different mobility devices and have different abilities to take part in our walk audits, because they use the walking infrastructure too. And we want folks who, are decision makers, but we also want folks who are younger and maybe are not voting to take part because they have a certain experience. So we try to get like a variety of different folks to take part in our walk audits, and we actually go through a process of trying to identify these folks with our local partners. Because we're state folks, and we're coming in and hosting these walk audits, but there's a lot of knowledge on the ground that like helps us like identify what is key to make this walk audit successful, and what should we leave you with to make sure that like we can improve walkability in where you live. So we might need to hone in on a specific like topic during that walk audit. Like it might be like the heat island effect in a certain area. So we might have a walk audit really focused on that, or climate topics, or maybe ADA challenges. So we can't sometimes cover everything. We try to do as much as we can, but sometimes we try to tailor the walk audit and really hone in on a specific thing. Speeding and challenges with vehicles are sometimes some of those things that many communities want to amplify. But yeah, can you remind me there was one more question you had, I think towards the end.
I think that covers it pretty
Okay,
good. Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
You know, it's great that you involve locals in that process, because the easiest places to map, at least in my opinion, are the places that you live or that you're familiar with. Yeah. So, you know, there's a whole lot of insight that comes there that you just can't get by looking at reports and other forms of data. Yeah. So thank you. And Scott, you mentioned these landways and also the stress map, and you were talking about some challenges of trying to conflate data and pull it together in order to build those maps. And so I was wondering if you could talk about the landways a little bit more, and then how that information relates to these stress maps that you're creating.
Yeah, so the landways is trying to look like a subway map. The inspiration is very much the T's map and styling. This actually the idea comes from some Paris advocates and what they did to get Paris to be as good at biking today as it is over the last few years. But we're trying to identify what routes, just like looking at the street network, what routes would make the most sense for people to bike down if you don't have to worry about what's actually on those streets. So basically, if you live in one neighborhood and work in another, how will you want to get there? And honestly, it's mostly like, what are the big arterial streets? But what are the most useful ones to get across town? How can we highlight that to people? And then from there, we want to work and be like, what are the gaps on these streets? Some of these streets, if you go down Com Ave, would be one of these big streets right here. At some parts of it, it is incredible to bike on. We have nice separated bike lanes, everything's clear, and in other sections, it's a bike lane right next to 2 lanes of fast-moving traffic, and that's just not very comfortable. So if you wanted to get from Kenmore, which is, you know, right down the street, to the other end of BU, you're going to have a much different experience depending on what section of that road is. So we're trying to highlight those individual sections, what the gaps are, and trying to identify, is it only really one block that's the problem here? And if you fix that one block, you make a network that is much better for everyone to use. And so that's where we're trying to work. We have the 2 projects right now, and there's an idea to try to get a project in the middle. But basically, what is our vision? What is the current state? And what is the progress? So we're also trying to highlight some of the cases, the cities and the state and all the different organizations are actively working on things and actively have plans. And so we want to highlight that too and make sure that we're on top of each of these individual projects to make sure that when they get implemented, they actually are doing world-class infrastructure and not bike lanes as an afterthought, because that is what historically bike lanes have been, is you just see that you have a wide enough shoulder and put a little bike marker on it, and congrats, you have a bike lane. But that doesn't actually help if it's not part of a network. And so that's really what we're trying to work on, is look at the network, and build a network and try to finish that out. I live in Cambridge, so when I biked here, I biked through Cambridge and then on DCR property on Memorial Drive, over the BU Bridge, which is a MassDOT bridge for a little bit of it, and a DCR bridge for a little bit of it, and into Boston. So we're also like very much, it's not one group that we're trying to work with here. We're trying to work with easily 5 or 6 different organizations that have ownership stakes in these different things. And so the BU Bridge very specifically is a gap that last summer someone was killed on the Cambridge side, where there was like a long-standing, long-known problem with the pathway. And we were separately of this BCU Labs work, I was working with a group of people to try to advocate, and it was going very slowly because we had 5 different organizations, including the T, that we had to work with. And so there's actually a change that happened on the BU Bridge just 2 weeks ago to make the bike lane a bit safer. And so that's the type of stuff that we're trying to highlight of like what gaps in this network. The BU Bridge is a huge, important network thing because every bridge along the river is important, basically, because there's only so many places that you can cross. And so we're really trying to use the maps to find these gaps, highlight them, and then we can further work on our advocacy efforts to try to hone in on those specific areas that would lead to the biggest improvement in safety and comfort for everyone.
Thanks. Yeah, it's got to be tough seamlessly splicing together bike paths that are on different people's property and different funding sources. Thank you for all the people in this room that do that, because as a cyclist myself, I enjoy being able to move around freely. All right, so we got one more question here, and then I want to turn it over to the audience for questions, so start thinking about things you might want to ask these panelists. So if you could maybe try and answer this in 1 minute-ish. So if I had some magical powers, and I just dropped my wand here, but if this were a wand, then I could grant you one wish of, either data or application or something related to mapping and geospatial, and then it would just appear and make your job a whole lot easier. What would that be?
I love this question. I wish more people would ask me this question. Let's see, for the Esplanade, I had kind of mentioned in the previous question some additional layers on maps that we would love to see, helping people know before you go in order to understand what amenities are open seasonally or closed seasonally, where you might have access issues if there are random stairs in the path, or if there's a bridge that isn't to the proper ADA access requirements. I think connecting to broader networks and seeing where those gaps are, the work that Yolando and Scott are doing, to have a map that shows where the Esplanade connects to the city bike networks, to Brookline to Cambridge bike networks, to the East Coast Greenway and other broader networks, and working with the city, with DCR, and with other agencies to help close those gaps and show where those gaps are would be really interesting and exciting to us. I'm going to add 2 more things. Sure. We have a wonderful partner on the Esplanade called Community Boating. They do low-cost and wonderful sailing classes for kids and families and adults. They have an incredible universal access sailing program that occasionally has folks driving down the Esplanade to get someone in a wheelchair as close as possible. So being able to show folks where are those safe places where a car with a permit can enter the park. And also to bring back in some of the vehicular challenges that we see near the Esplanade. Storrow Drive has the abutments to all of those bridges that cross the Charles River, and many of them have height restrictions. So you may have heard about the instance of Storrowing, where folks drive their trucks a little bit too far and hit those bridges. So being able to add in those bridge heights would be really helpful, I think, for a lot of people in the city.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, so if there was a magic wand, we would love to see if there's a way that we can see those challenges that exist and basically walk amenities mapped out. So we conduct walk audits in many different places, and sometimes you don't get to see the before and after of like the recommendations that we share or the different insights that we gather. So we would love to, like, one, go to a place, collect all of these challenges, collect all these amenities, and it's mapped. But then we would also like to see, like, our place is changing over time, and can we see a before and after of our reports and a before and after of the conditions. It takes a lot of work on our end to try to go back to all these different places throughout the state to try to capture the after pictures or try to talk to people and collect that insights. And sometimes it's probably required maybe in a lot of ways, but if anybody has any ideas or ways that we could do that, that'd be very helpful.
Scott, thank you.
Yeah, we're looking very much on finding tools to make it easier for us to build these tools. So like very much trying to find better ways to get a big map for the land waste project. Right now, it's a bunch of screenshots that are then hand stitched together to try to make a big map. So it's, and then trying to get the idea of, at some point we want to put in the city's plans and the state's plans for different things and all their different planning documents, try to get that information onto a map and show what is the future plan so that we can start tracking against that. Don't really know how to get that at this point and get it and show it. So lots of things about how do we take the information that's on the map or from other sources. There are some data sources that tell us how much the state has, that tell us their estimate of how many cars travel a given street segment. But it's in some state database, and trying to get that information and correlate it to the OpenStreetMap segments. I don't actually know how to do that at the moment. So trying to figure out how we can take all these external data sources and link them up to the maps that we're trying to make, and how to also better make maps to display what we're trying to show and highlight the network and the network effects that we're trying to do.
Cool, thank you. It sounds like there's some data problems here. Some are actually solvable, some maybe not, especially like looking into the future a little bit. All right, so I'd just like to turn it over to the audience here. If anyone has any questions, just ask that, yep, maybe Maggie will bring you the mic or walk up to the mic. Nate? There's one right behind you.
Yep, it's on.
There's one right there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I was wondering, there's a lot of qualitative descriptions about the benefits of different innovations, and this question could be for anyone that maybe has dabbled in this. Has there been any sort of economic analysis, any justifications, any modeling or anything that's been done to try and put a cost-benefit analysis in terms that politicians and business managers and because quality of life stuff is always a little bit squishy to pin down. So I'm wondering if there's any cost-benefit type analyses that have been done.
Yeah, whoever wants to take that, I don't know.
Yeah, so walkable communities, there's a lot of benefits to economic development. They help to bring a lot more foot traffic to local businesses that many times are struggling. So we've put together some reports with Mass Inc. That looks at like how walkable communities, specifically like more dense communities that have public transit, that has bike lanes, how those things actually do help local businesses and create more thriving places that generate jobs and all that stuff, and people can walk to work and also not spend as much money on traveling in a vehicle and all that stuff. So that report is on Mass Inc.'s website. I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. It's like social infrastructure, I think is the name of it. But it's, the social infrastructure actually does impact a lot of our economic outputs.
I have a dream to like make an analysis that uses census data or uses bike count data to try to show if you add this segment, this little half-mile segment of street, how many, I've seen this in some other cities, how many more people have access to a job that is safely bikeable, access to restaurants, access to supermarkets, access to parks, and trying to show that as an equity thing of like these segments have outsized impact in access expansion. And then similarly, doing post-analysis of like, hey, you just updated this segment, it's a lot safer now, and let's look at bike count data, Blue Bikes, which is the local bike share. That's how I got here today. They publish all the rides, start and end stations and times since 2011. Every month they'll publish that. And so you actually get like really good data. And so that's some of the, at some point I would love to have integrating that data from these different sources and trying to compare it against the map and see how we can show that future work is going to be valuable, and then also validate that past work has actually made things more useful and show that people are, what was holding them back was safe bike infrastructure and not because they truly love their cars.
I'll just add here, I think these examples from Scott and Yolanda are really incredible for people who already live somewhere and for people who are looking to move somewhere. If you're looking for good bike lanes and access, there's an economic development angle there. I think tourism is also something to add here, that if you have a city that is welcoming for conferences like this one, or for people traveling internationally, people who have specific interests in green transportation, that value is additional for a city or state.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yep.
Hi, thanks so much to the panel for this discussion. My name is Stephen Larrick. I actually work for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, so regional planning agency. We work with the municipal governments in the metro area. And so my question, we heard from Yolanda and from Scott about kind of how your work intersects a little bit with local government officials, and I'm curious in general, what might local government be able to do, either technically to kind of publish or share data that could help your work, or kind of more generally to kind of better provide geospatial data or to better work with you on kind of the data needs that you all have in your organizations to advance your missions? Thanks.
Yeah, I'll say local governments are collecting information through people can basically submit reports or challenges that they see in their community. Specifically in Massachusetts, many towns and cities have something called See, Click, Fix or 311. So that's like collecting a lot of data around like infrastructure challenges, specifically walkability challenges. But some of that data I feel like is kind of closed off from us, the public, and we would love to like get that data so that we can like just see what are folks reporting as issues, and then see how we can support the municipalities in addressing those issues, or like fold those into other planning efforts. I feel like sometimes it's just those reports come in, people have these challenges, and then the municipality tries to address those challenges, but it seems like there's a lot of like data there that's not being utilized.
I'm a big fan of the open data portals the different cities have. We have a lot of cities around here. Boston and Cambridge are relatively large. Some of the other ones are smaller and don't actually have open data portals. So for some cities, it's harder to actually find the data. And then even in Cambridge, they have an open data portal, but often they'll do traffic counts and traffic and speed counts for car data before and after projects. And they post that data on a PDF on that project-specific page. And so then if you wanted to like find that data, you have to know all of the projects and go and search and try to scrape it. MassDOT also has a website where they have all their bike counters. So most of the bridges along the Charles have a bike counter. That is not particularly accessible to get the data off. There's no like API, no way you can just download the data. And so that's really hard to actually get access to the data.
Great data you can't use. Okay, I think we might have time for one more question. Okay. There we go.
I have a question about the walkability audits that you're doing, and also to some extent the bikeability audits. And I'm curious if you have, when you're working with people from the community, do you have trouble getting them to see what makes good bike or pedestrian infrastructure? And how do you go about coaching them on here are the things that make the difference between okay and great?
Yeah, education is definitely a key piece of all of this. Folks can only imagine a world that they've been exposed to, so we have to sometimes share with them alternative options for what is out there. So we have something called the Walk Audit Academy. So we basically have folks go through a whole process of learning what a walk audit is too, and what are some of the different infrastructures that are there, like options, and what are different solutions that are also at the table. So Walk Audit Academy is something that we more recently came up with and innovated, and we're implementing that in more places. But yeah, I think education is key to just allow folks to like understand what their options are.
Education is huge. I work with a lot of bike advocates. The one thing that everyone has in common is they like to ride their bike, and not much else. Most of us don't particularly have a background in street design, traffic engineering, civil engineering, et cetera. And so the learning of like, what are the nuances of what is a good thing when the city presents their plans. Add a hole, you see a big bike lane, and that good? I don't know. But like, it takes a while for people to actually understand like, oh, this little feature here is something that you need to look for. And so that's, certainly education's been huge. But on the other end, there's some people in the community that it doesn't matter. They just hate bikes for whatever reason. And so there is a nuance there of also like understanding who is open to education and who is not, and what effort you need to put there.
And I think learning from a young age as well. The city has a really wonderful program where they're setting up temporary tiny towns where little kids can learn what's safe street behavior, whether you're in a car or on foot or on a bike, and helping little ones learn about sharing these spaces together, that you could be in any one of those categories at any given time, and that you should expect a culture of safety from your community.
Thank you. Yeah, from tiny homes to tiny towns, and convincing non-cyclists that we need bike paths is very hard. But yeah, I think that concludes our time here. If we could all give the panelists a round of applause here. Thank you.